went along with the lie that Alex Jones says nobody died at Parkland, total horse manure. No, people died on Valentine's Day, that massacre. I never said they didn't. And it's like, man, are all you guys followers? Because you're supposed to be a maverick, Trump. And I sit there and I look at this candy-ass Matt Gaetz, and then I look at your base and your amplification, people that take your speeches and put them out and counter stuff in real time, and I see a 90% cutoff in that. When I know you're into the Fox News, where there's 4 million viewers, top show, great for Hannity. And you're into CNN with 1 million viewers and all this stuff. It's a joke, man. You're like some old person that loves the horse and buggy carts in 1915 when the Model T comes out. And I'm like telling you, hey, Mr. President, the automobile's already here. And you're just like, shut up, Sonny, I like my horsies. And these people are running rings around you, effing you and this whole country over, thinking we're stupid with shadow bans and all the rest of the incredible criminal crap they're pulling.
You're not a nice person.
Auto sequence starts. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's that time again. Matt Connarton, Unleashed in the afternoon. And what a rainy, dreary afternoon it is here in Manchester, New Hampshire. Live on WMNH 95.3 FM. Streaming at WMNHradio.org. You can also find WMNH on the TuneIn app, which is a wonderful thing. You can watch on Channel 97 Comcast if you're in the Manchester, New Hampshire area. And you can, of course, access the show from anywhere on Facebook via Facebook Live on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. I already see Matt DaCosta in the Facebook Live chat. Hey, Matt. 603-250-6007 is the number to call, 603-250-6007. And, of course, you can always interject and opine in the Facebook Live chat. You can also tweet me at Matt Connarton. It is Thursday, July 26, 2018. And at least it's not as hot, but, man, it's I hope the sun comes back out. Actually, it's already looking like it might. I need sunlight, my friends. I do. I do. So, as is often the case, oh, by the way, shout outs to Rocky Mountain Mike, the YouTuber who did that Warren Zevon Lawyers, Guns, and Money parody in honor of Michael Cohen, or Michael Cohen, as John Hopwood is always correcting me. Rocky Mountain Mike, I play a lot of his stuff. He does these the song parodies that he's my go-to more than anybody else on YouTube as far as fun parodies. I'm also a big fan of Randy Rainbow. If you're a longtime listener, you might know that. And there's also a parody project, which I really like a lot. Hello to Heidi Hamer, who also joins us in the Facebook Live chat. Oh, Patrick Henry has commented. He said, hey, Matt, was thinking about what you said about needing vitamins in Vietnam. I can't stop laughing every time. Most Americans are fat and lazy. That doesn't make us healthier by any means. The Vietnamese are actually very healthy people. They eat healthy food and exercise religiously. I don't know who you've been talking to that's been feeding you the garbage about needing vitamins there, LMAO. Well, I really wasn't talking to anybody who was feeding me anything like that, Patrick. I just was curious, Very often when Americans travel abroad, they like to bring vitamins with them. That's you're reading into it a little much, I think, but that's okay. Hello to Heidi Hamer, who says, good afternoon. Did John Hopwood ever find out whose shots those were in his front yard? Yes, shorts, but Joel the Moose Elber, who of course is the best newsman in the business, and a legendary broadcaster. The word shorts, he pronounces it shots. You know, a lot of folks from this part of the country will tend to drop their R's, but Joel really kind of, he has a certain commitment level with that. It doesn't have to be an R at the end of the word. It can be right in the middle. So, but as far as I know, no one has claimed the shots. If you missed yesterday's show, John Hopwood was here. Apparently, he was mowing his lawn and came across some men's underwear, which he then, in disgust, kicked into the bushes. Now, personally, I don't disagree with his decision to not necessarily want to pick up the underwear just on the spot there, but maybe put on a latex glove and do so. But I've always said, when you find someone's underwear on your lawn and you just kick the underwear into the bushes, it's no different than sweeping dirt under the rug. Or as Archie Bunker, of course, on All in the Family once said, aren't you just sweeping dirty dishes under the rug? All in the Family, of course, in my view, the greatest sitcom in the history of television, though I know many would say Seinfeld deserves that honor, or as Joel the Moose Elber would say, Steinfeld. But, he will drop the R in shorts and pronounce it shots, but he will put a T in the word Seinfeld where it doesn't necessarily belong. But that's why we love him. And the morning show with Peter White and the Moose, they had another great... I love when they argue, when they bicker. Oh, it's radio gold. By the way, if you ever miss the morning show, there's obviously the afternoon replay right before this program. And then, of course, all the shows here at WMNH. If you don't know, now you know. As who was that? It's a 90s hip-hop reference, but... they all get archived at WMNHradio.org. So if you miss this show, if you miss that show, if you miss any of the shows, you can go back and get them and listen to them at your leisure. Growing up, I was taught that it was pronounced leisure, but I heard someone say leisure, and I just decided that's how I'm going to pronounce that going forward. I feel that both pronunciations have value. Hello to Peter White, who joins us in the Facebook live chat. Pete, I was just talking about you, and of course the great Joel Elber, and I'm sure Mr. Hopwood, if that is his real name, I'm never sure. He's a man of many personalities and identities. I'm sure he'll keep us updated on the errant men's underwear that he did find on his lawn. I can't say that's ever happened to me. I mean, I could say it. I could make up a story. Radio is theater of the mind, but I will refrain from such because, I try to keep it real, as I think the young people say today. Yesterday, when Dr. Rich called in, Dr. John D. Rich Jr., he interacts with young people. He's a college professor, so he's interacting with them on a regular basis, as does, of course, Ben Dion, host of the weekly Dion, Thursdays at 6 p.m., immediately following this show. And Ben, of course, he teaches school here locally in Manchester. So I always look to them for guidance on how to communicate with the youth of today. Because when you're doing a show like this, and you want to court that young audience, it's important to be hip, and to be down with it and things like that, So it's important to keep up on the modern lingo so that I know. I want to always know what's up, or perhaps it's what up, or whatever it may be. I think that it's important. You can't spread a message or promote ideas to young people if you can't speak their language, if you know what I mean. So I look to folks for guidance on that. Let's see. I suppose we should get into some things, and as is often the case, sometimes I'm not sure what to start with because there's so much going on. There's so much to cover. It is and continues to be an embarrassment of riches, as someone once said. I don't know who, or many people have said. I don't know. I'm trying to remember where I first heard that expression. I can't remember, but it stuck with me. I liked it. I was like, an embarrassment of riches. I like that. That's good stuff. God, there's so much. Okay, well, I suppose let's start with this effort to impeach Rosenstein. They voted. Republicans voted in the House to, in fact, impeach Rod Rosenstein. If you didn't know, it's not just presidents who can be impeached. I mean, you can impeach all kinds of people. It's really remarkable. But Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, for a little bit longer, although Kevin McCarthy obviously would love to see Mr. Ryan move on and get out of the speakership. Almost slipped there. The speakership so that he can move into it, you know, and I'm sure there's been private conversations there where Mr. McCarthy has maybe said things to Mr. Ryan like, "Hey man, you ever miss Wisconsin? You know, a lot of cheese there. Don't you miss the cheese?" And then Paul Ryan probably responds, "No, man, I bring cheese with me. I bring cheese with me to the office of the Speaker of the House, which I intend to continue to occupy for, well, a little bit longer. Just going to have to hang in there." Hang on, Sloopy. The young folks definitely won't know that reference. My goodness. I'm already thwarting my plans to appeal to the youth. Really, I want to be multi-generational is what it is. I want to have something for everybody, which is really impossible. You can't please everyone. According to Politico, Ryan rejects conservative push to impeach Rosenstein, but the Speaker may support charging the Deputy Attorney General with contempt of Congress if a key committee moves against him. I have contempt for Congress. I hope no one's going to be moving against me. Not quite the same thing. Well, there's different kinds of contempt, obviously. I'm just kidding. It says here, Speaker Paul Ryan today firmly rejected an effort by House conservatives to impeach Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, putting him at odds with hardliners in his party and even some in his own leadership team. But it's unclear how long he can keep them at bay. Just minutes after, the Wisconsin Republican told reporters that he did not think Rosenstein's actions merited his removal from office, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows said Ryan had agreed to a different deal. Conservatives would give the Justice Department one last chance in August to turn over a range of documents that lawmakers subpoenaed in March, or else Rosenstein could face charges of contempt of Congress. Said Meadows, a top ally of President Donald Trump. Well, aren't they all? Well, all the ones that are, have to run for re-election in the midterms. He said, quote, "The Speaker is willing to support House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte in a contempt process if the agreed-upon documents are not delivered," unquote. What if you have contempt for the process? Again, I'm kidding. Moving forward with contempt proceedings would escalate the clash between Congress and DOJ and potentially become a court battle over Capitol Hill's access to executive branch documents. The agreement negotiated on the House floor this morning highlights how Ryan has attempted to balance the aggressive demands of Trump allies without undermining the ongoing investigations of the Justice Department or Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election, including potential collusion with the Trump campaign. He really, there's more to this, but, he really, the Republican leadership, I don't envy them. Not that I have any sympathy for them either. Politicians in general, I enjoy watching them squirm. And it is fun watching leadership in the Republican Party squirm over this constant thing of trying to balance, on the one hand, they need to look like they're with Trump because that's what the base demands. The base loves Trump. That's why that's why everyone who's up for re-election, and of course in the House, that's, you only get a 2-year term, so you're constantly running for re-election. Of course, regardless of how long your term is, you're constantly raising money for re-election, but that's a slightly separate thing. But, the ones that aren't running for re-election, they feel free to speak their mind, but the ones who are, they don't dare cross Trump. On the other hand, If they look like they're protecting Trump, which is obviously what it would look like if they went through with this and actually did remove Rosenstein, what would the assumption be? That, we're just taking out a roadblock on our way to firing Mueller, right? We're gonna finally get rid of Mueller. Because the president himself isn't going to. I know, everyone always talks about what if Trump fires Mueller. Trump is not going to fire Mueller. That would, nothing more than that would scream, I'm guilty and I'm hiding something, than Trump actually firing Mueller. And Trump, as brash as he may be and as Trumpy as he may be, even he understands that, right? So, but if he can get somebody to do it for him, that might be so. But it would be obvious, right? If they actually removed Rosenstein, it's like, okay, so we know what the end game is for these people, and that can backfire. Yeah, their base wants them to protect Trump, but you don't win elections just with your base. You also need independents who, quote unquote, swing voters, what have you. And they're going to be like, whoa, you see what they just did? Yep, they're trying to protect Trump. So leadership has to really walk that high wire. And I guess, too, the vote of these Republicans who did vote for impeaching Rosenstein, I mean, it's really a symbolic thing, right? Because there was no way this was going to actually happen. It's not actually going to go anywhere. But again, so they're, the Republicans voting for this, I assume, are the ones that are making the calculation that it's better for us to look like we're with the president than it is to look like we're trying to protect the president. Or, well, actually, let me put it this way. Let me rephrase that. It's one thing to look like we're trying to protect the president because he's embroiled in this witch hunt. But it's better to look like we're protecting him for that reason than it would if it looks like we're actually trying to protect him because we think that there really is something there. And, he's our guy. So, but, these symbolic gestures, it's not unusual in the halls of Congress for these symbolic gestures to take place that everyone knows aren't actually going to go anywhere. I mean, when John Boehner was in charge, what was it? Something like 60 times, and I'm not exaggerating with that number. I think it was at least on 60 separate occasions, House Republicans voted, or they took a vote. They didn't succeed, but they voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They voted to repeal Obamacare. I think it was at least 60 times. And every time, obviously, they knew they couldn't actually get it done. They knew they didn't have the votes. But it was a grand symbolic gesture because they were, for so long, repeal and replace had been their mantra. And so they had to constantly look like they were doing something and working toward that, working to that end. So they, and personally, I have to tell you, I'm not a big fan of grand symbolic gestures. We send these people, our elected lawgivers and overlords who we entrust them, of course, with knowing what's best for us. We send them, in theory, with our tax dollars to Washington to do the people's business and to represent us, not for grand symbolic gestures that don't actually end up to anything and are in the end a colossal waste of time. I guess they're not entirely a waste of time, though, for the individuals taking the votes, because while most of America probably didn't notice, when they were in that cycle where they kept taking that vote to repeal the ACA under Boehner, and they kept doing it like every week or every other week, they were taking the same vote, voting on the same thing or some variation of it. Most people don't notice. They tune out. They don't care. It's just something that, the media is not even reporting on it much because it's something that's not going anywhere anyway. But when it becomes useful is when it's time to, start producing campaign materials, and then you can put it in print. You can put it in a campaign ad that's running on television that so-and-so voted again and again to repeal Obamacare, and then that. So it helps that way. It helps later as a marketing tool, right? Because politics is marketing, and running for re-election is marketing. But in the moment, it's like, why do they continue to waste their time with this? I did go off on a bit of a tangent there. There's a lot of details up on Politico.com, but Judge Napolitano had some things to say about this. And Napolitano, Jenny's a big fan of Napolitano and speaks of him and speaks well of him and his lack of partisanship. Napolitano is a conservative or kind of maybe he's more libertarian than conservative, but however you want to characterize him, he is a darling of Fox News. So he's on there frequently commenting on things, but he doesn't always say exactly. He doesn't particularly toe the party line. He's intellectually honest in the sense that, he doesn't just go on there and shill for Trump. He'll say when he thinks Trump is wrong. He'll say when he thinks the Republicans are doing things wrong. And and obviously they continue to have him on because more often than not, he agrees with what the Republicans are doing, right? And he's articulate enough that he can try to convince you. If you don't agree with what the Republicans are doing, he might, he's one of those people, he might be able to convince you. But he's not afraid to say, okay, I think this is bad. Or there was a clip the other day of his, I never got to it, but I was going to play it and then I just never got to it. We ran out of time, but he was talking about how a specific reason why he thinks the president is in trouble with these Michael Cohen tapes in a way that other people aren't considering, because there's a lot of debate about, does it matter, does it not matter, et cetera. So the point is, I think Napolitano is interesting because he's intellectually honest in his assessments. He's not just there to be a spokesperson for the Republican Party and for the president, much as he loves the Republicans and loves the president. I don't know if he loves the president, but I shouldn't put that on. I've never actually heard him say, I love the president. By the way, Napolitano, too, I've always been kind of fascinated by his hair, because his hairline is almost like there's almost no space between his eyebrows and his hairline. It's like, it's amazing. Like you can, like, he'll never be bald because you can tell, like, he barely even has any forehead. It's like his hairline comes all the way down. If you're watching on Facebook Live, or you can see it, it comes almost all the way down to his eyebrows. It's like, dude, where's your forehead? It's incredible. Maybe it's plastic surgery. There's been rumors that Trump at one point had a brow lift, and that's why, because if you notice, Trump has almost no forehead, but in his case, it's because he's doing the comb forward and it kind of hangs down. I probably shouldn't be picking on people's hair. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play this clip for you because he has some insight on this vote. Napolitano does. Andrew Napolitano. Not to be confused with the other Napolitano that we used to talk about, who's long gone, but of course Janet Napolitano, who was Homeland Security Secretary under Obama. Not when I say she's long gone, I don't mean she's dead or anything like that. I just mean she's no longer in government. Or maybe she is. I don't know. Maybe she's in the deep state. So we just don't see her because she's working in the deep state. She's in the deep state. Okay, anyway, here's Andrew Napolitano.
Rod Rosenstein is one step closer to being impeached, and it could happen as soon as today.
Well, something could happen. House conservatives filing articles of impeachment over allegation he's held up investigations into those anti-Trump FBI agents.
Yeah, this happened last night. So here to weigh in, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, you're not for this
No.
symbolic move.
It is a symbolic, but I have to start by saying the people behind this are longtime friends of mine, whom I respect and admire and like.
Of like minds.
Yes, and I often agree with them. This is...
Got to get that in there because he wants to make sure he's invited back. He is on Fox and Friends, after all, where you got, you got Steve Ducey. Never sure if I'm saying his name quite correctly. Steve Ducey, Brian Kilmeade, the token blonde who sits in the middle. Which someone accused me of being sexist, by the way, with the thing about the token blonde. I'm just saying that's in no way to dehumanize her in any way or objectify her. I'm just saying that's the Fox and Friends formula and has been for more than 20 years, right from the very beginning. You got because the other two guys, I think they've been there from the beginning. You got Ducey, Kilmeade, and the token blonde. Anyway,
11 House
Yeah, this is
Republicans.
the small government crowd in the House that sometimes torments the House leadership when they want to do things that are too big government oriented. But on this, I profoundly disagree with them. And it doesn't matter what I think. The Constitution says there's a very, very narrow basis for impeachment, and that's intentional. If it were a broad basis, people would be getting kicked out of office left and right. Treason, this is directly from the Constitution, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. When Bill Clinton
Which is
was
a little vague.
A little vague intentionally, but when Bill Clinton was impeached, it was obstructing justice by lying under oath. So it has to be something of that magnitude. Improperly signing off on a FISA warrant, staying in a position of a conflict of interest where you could be a witness in a case and you're managing the case.
And those are good arguments.
Those are good arguments for ethical violations, but not for impeachable
Why didn't he
offenses.
recuse himself?
Well, you'd have to ask him why he didn't recuse himself, and that may be coming.
Right. But Judge, what do you expect these members of Congress who are frustrated with the Department of Justice? They have asked for months and months and months for certain documents which they are entitled to, and that they have stonewalled. And apparently now the Department of Justice is going to cough some of them up next week.
Well, they're going to cough them up because of threats like this, which are, in my opinion, wrong and baseless, but embarrassing for everybody
By the way, Douchey got all worked up there, didn't he? Oh, my goodness.
involved. The DOJ has a legitimate lawful basis for keeping certain documents secret in a pending investigation. I want this Mueller thing over as soon as possible, but it is still pending. And you'd be interfering with it if you forced the public revelation of some of those documents. But the backstory is Eric Holder. What? Yeah, 6 years ago, when he was held in contempt by a Republican Congress, he was the Attorney General, for refusing to surrender documents on Fast and Furious. He was held in contempt.
He was involved in the Fast and Furious series? That explains. I saw a picture of him arm wrestling Vin Diesel on what looked like a movie set. I'm kidding. It's a joke.
And nothing happened. You could hear a pin drop. They have to take the contempt across the street to a federal court and prosecute the contempt. If they don't do that, then nothing happens.
It's par for the course, though. This happens in Washington. We feel like they're above the law. So many people get in trouble. So many people get held in contempt. Nothing ever happens.
Nothing ever happens. This will almost be a red badge of courage for Rosenstein that he endured this, defending the integrity, in his view, of the Department of Justice.
Judge,
That's a great point. And if he doesn't endure it, if they actually did succeed at impeaching him, like I said earlier, that's part of the balance, right? That these Republicans, the line that they're trying to walk, or leadership is trying to walk, because if they were to impeach Rosenstein successfully and remove him, then he's a martyr for the cause of. What if? Because here's the thing. So think it through. What if they impeach Rosenstein, they remove him, he's a martyr, and then he's really a martyr because at the end of all this, it turns out Trump is. I mean, how does that even work? There's arguments over whether a sitting president can even be indicted. But, so if they get rid of Rosenstein and then it turns out, oh, this whole quote unquote witch hunt wasn't quite the witch hunt that we thought it was. Maybe we shouldn't have, does that vindicate Rosenstein? Does that vindicate James Comey? Does that vindicate whomever else? Does that vindicate Peter Strzok and Lisa Page? Truth is, it won't really vindicate anybody, even if that's what happens, because we have very long memories in some ways, but very short memories in others. And no, they probably would not. It would not be a vindication for them, I don't think, in the general consciousness of people who think about these things. But all right, this clip is almost done. I'm going to try to play the rest of it without interrupting. There's about 25 seconds left.
they're just not. If they thought it was a legitimate reason to hold back documents, Jordan and Meadows would have backed off. They feel as though Rosenstein is dragging this out to get a new house, so he doesn't have to deal with it. It's hard to argue with that.
I think you are correct that they feel that way. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But this is not going to be over before November. I don't know if this is going to produce a new house. That's 435 local elections, effectively. But they do agree, they do feel that way. You're right, Brian.
Well,
and this is a way to bring public attention to all of this.
And I will say this.
All right, that's the end of the clip. It looks like Kilme had something to add, but but that's the end of the clip from Mediaite. Let's move on to some other things, shall we? 603-250-6007, by the way, is the number to call, 603-250-6007. John Bolton, when John Bolton does things that are disruptive in any way or causes for concern, I'm never quite sure. Look, there's a part of me that wants to give him the benefit of the doubt. I have theories, and, some would say they're supernatural, my theories, and therefore that's ridiculous, Matt, is what people will say, or sort of a sci-fi idea of how this may really work. But I'm just going to put it out there, and you can agree, disagree. It's just a theory. I have no way to prove it. But who's really in control when it comes to John Bolton? Is it John Bolton himself, or is it the mustache? That look, the mustache is unnaturally large. And you might be thinking, Matt, he just grows it that way. He just doesn't trim it. He lets it grow. I say no. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible for a normal human to grow a mustache that large. Or I don't think it's possible for any human, normal or not so normal, to grow a mustache that large without the mustache itself having some sort of... I'm looking at a picture of John Bolton right now. This mustache probably has its own nervous system. Hopefully it doesn't feel pain, because I'd hate to think that it's in pain every time he does trim it, if he trims it at all. But it's an instinctive thing with me. I look at the mustache and I'm legitimately terrified. It strikes fear in my heart. And so I have these concerns about the mustache. And for all we know, John Bolton himself might be, under that, he's such a war hawk, right? Or so we all think. But underneath it all, he might just be a hippie who's all about peace and love and just wants to get along in the world. But the mustache is in control. It's the mustache. And the mustache will never truly die. That's why John Bolton, for so long, he was out of the national security picture. And then he suddenly reappears, and next thing you know, he's in the Trump administration. Why? Why does the mustache never go away? Part of my theory, too, is I've noticed sometimes when John Bolton is, I see him walking on television, walking up to a podium to give a speech. He's leaning forward slightly, almost as though the mustache is controlling his movements and leading him where it wants him to go. I understand, no one wants to believe anything that I'm saying right now, and you want to think that that's all crazy. And Matt, what kind of hallucinogenics have you been taking? But I'm just concerned. There's something here the rest of you just clearly don't quite see. I'm good like that. Sometimes I detect things. I pick up on things that others don't notice. And I'm worried about the mustache. But anyway, here is the story from Politico. Cabinet chiefs feel shut out of John Bolton or his mustache. John Bolton's efficient policy process. Efficient, quote unquote. Defense Secretary James Mattis has gone so far as to draft a letter requesting the National Security Advisor and his mustache hold more gatherings of agency and department chiefs. There's tension. There's palace intrigue in the Trump White House because Bolton and his mustache have said, we're having less meetings. By the way, as I said that, the reason I paused there for a moment, I just realized something. Who speaks for the mustache? Or who does John Bolton really speak for, I should say? Because the mustache obviously itself cannot speak, but John Bolton can. So does John Bolton simply do the mustache's bidding because the mustache is in control, or does he do its bidding because the mustache simply tells John Bolton what to say? So it's not so much a matter of the mustache being in control, but the mustache telling John Bolton what he should say, and then John Bolton just says it. So the mustache somehow communicates to John Bolton, fewer meetings. We're going to have fewer meetings. That's how I imagine the mustache would talk, by the way, with a kind of a slightly deeper voice. And then John Bolton is just like, okay, fewer meetings, got it. Mr. President, I think we should have fewer meetings or something. Whatever it is. That's a terrible John Bolton impression. I'm terrible at impressions, which is why I don't do them often. So I apologize for my terrible John Bolton impression. But I do not apologize for my imagining of what I think the mustache may sound like, because in my heart, and again, I don't know how I know this, it's just an instinctive thing. I look at the mustache and I think that's how the mustache talks. And it's just something I kind of know. I just kind of instinctively feel that. Of course, the mustache can't literally talk, so it doesn't actually have a voice. But John Bolton has to hear the voice of the mustache in his head, right? Because the mustache communicates to him what to say. So I'm guessing that in John Bolton's mind, when he hears the mustache communicating these ideas, he hears it in a slightly deep voice like this. And this is just how the mustache talks. And the mustache says, hey, John, I need you to say less meetings. And then John Bolton probably responds to the mustache out loud. And then people think he's crazy. And then they just think, well, maybe he's wearing a Bluetooth, a very small Bluetooth that we can't see. But then John Bolton, appearing to others to be talking to no one, he's actually talking to the mustache. He says, okay, mustache, that's what we'll do. Less meetings. We got to go bomb some countries. And then the mustache is like, no, don't say that right now. Say that later when you go on Tucker Carlson's show. And then John Bolton's like, oh, okay, sorry, mustache. He probably just calls it mustache. I'm not going to say that I think the mustache itself has a name. It probably just goes by mustache or John Bolton's mustache or JBM. That's what I would want to call it. Like if I had facial hair that I had some kind of a relationship with where I was able to communicate with it, I would probably, if my name were John Bolton, I'd call it JBM for John Bolton's mustache. Or in my case, I'd call it MCM for Matt Connarton's mustache. I'd want to have it some sort of a name. To just call it mustache seems dehumanizing somehow, like it's not worthy of having a name. I mean, look, I think any of us with facial hair can agree on this, right? Regardless of what your ideology may be, whether you're liberal or conservative or whatever, I think we can all agree on this much. If you have facial hair that is its own sentient being with its own mind and nervous system that just happens to be attached to your face, does that facial hair not deserve its own name and the respect of an identity? Think about that. Don't think about it too hard. So apparently, JBM and John Bolton are trying to simplify the administration's decision-making process. It says here, National Security Advisor John Bolton's effort to simplify the decision-making process is frustrating Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary James Mattis and causing confusion about the United States' position on major issues, including Russia, according to officials familiar with the situation. There's more to this, and we'll come back to it. But I have a suggestion for Mr. Pompeo and for General Mattis. What if, and honestly, they would be, I think, doing a tremendous national service, a tremendous global service, really. What if they were to remove the mustache from John Bolton's face? Now, obviously, you can't just go and rip it off, right? It's attached. But what if, let's say, they're sharing a drink, and they're sharing some drinks, maybe the three of them, right, at the end of a long day, because being part of the Trump administration, I assume every day is a long day. And you get to the end of the day, and they're just kind of kicking back, and, Trump's gone upstairs to the residence. He's watching Tucker Carlson on Fox. And so there's Mattis and Pompeo and Bolton, and they're just kind of kicking it. I think the kids say that still, don't they? Kicking it? Maybe not. And having some drinks, and maybe Bolton, he has one drink too many. He gets a little sleepy. Maybe he passes out. He doesn't strike me as a guy that can hold his liquor. And maybe someone just, almost like a college prank, right? Someone just happens to have an electric razor with them. Maybe Pompeo. Pompeo looks like a mischievous guy to me. He looks like a guy who would, I can imagine him pulling out an electric razor with kind of a gleam in his eye, looking at Mattis like, hey, you wanna? And then Mattis is like, yeah. And then they plug in the electric razor, and then or it has batteries. And then while Bolton is asleep, having nightmares about Iran and North Korea and whatever goes on in his nightmares, I don't even want to know, Pompeo is shaving off the mustache of John Bolton. Now, what would be fascinating about this is what happens next? Does Bolton immediately begin to wake up? Does he successfully shave the mustache, and then that's the end of it? And then it's like Bolton is a different guy because it turns out the mustache was, in fact, controlling him all along? I mean, think about what an incredible experiment this would be. Like, I actually really want this to happen. And I want there to be, ideally, in my fantasy world, there would be hidden cameras there. And then it could be all recorded and used as a segment on that show, Practical Jokers. And Trump likes shows like that, I'm sure. He's a TV guy. This could all be great. And then, maybe we get a new John Bolton, and the mustache, with all its evil intentions, with all its malice and malevolence, would be nothing more than a pile of hair on the floor. Now, of course, if my theories about the mustache are in fact accurate, it would not be a big shock that the mustache sort of regenerates, like it reconstitutes itself, right? And now you've got, because can the mustache actually ever be defeated? I don't know. What happens then? What if the mustache reconstitutes itself, like Pompeo just carelessly leaves it on the carpet thinking it's going to be vacuumed up, and it becomes a giant eyebrow instead, and then it attaches itself to Ivanka Trump's forehead or something, and then she's walking around with this patch of hair on her forehead, and this patch of hair on her forehead is causing her to say, I think we ought to go out and bomb everybody that we don't like. We ought to start World War III. And people are like, oh my goodness, what's happened to Ivanka, and why does she have that big patch of hair on her forehead? And unbeknownst to all of us, that used to be John Bolton's mustache. And you can't kill it. And it's determined to kill all of us. Who knows? I'm just spitballing here, but I mean, I think it's a pretty solid theory. You probably all think I'm crazy, but I'm telling you, someday we're going to find out. It says here, Mattis has gone so far as to draft a letter to Bolton requesting that he hold more gatherings of agency and department chiefs, quote, to smooth the bubble, unquote, on thorny issues ranging from U.S. policy in Syria to North Korea. You think I'm crazy? This guy's talking about smoothing a bubble. I've never heard of smoothing a bubble. I've heard of popping a bubble. I've heard of blowing bubbles. Smoothing a bubble? What kind of nonsense is this? Mattis is nuts. That's why they call him Mad Dog Mattis. He's crazy. Trump surrounds himself with all these crazy people. In particular, senior officials are concerned about the dearth of principals committee meetings scheduled by Bolton, officials say. Principals committee meetings are traditionally key forums for relevant cabinet bosses to prepare and recommend policy options for the president. Of special concern is the U.S. relationship with Russia, especially since Trump's July 16th meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, with only translators present. Officials across U.S. agencies have been trying to figure out what Trump and Putin discussed. Russian officials, meanwhile, have taken advantage of the U.S. confusion to make a series of announcements about what they say Trump and Putin agreed upon. Bolton did not convene any principals committee meetings to discuss the Trump-Putin summit ahead of time and hasn't held any such meetings on the issue since the event took place. Bolton is taking steps that could allay... there's a typo here. Bolton is taking steps that could tamp down, I'll put in the missing word, these concerns, convening at least 3 high-level meetings this week to tackle U.S. policy on Iran, North Korea, and election security. Defenders say Bolton, who held top national security positions during the George W. Bush administration, is simply cutting unnecessary bureaucratic red tape, pushing the nitty-gritty discussions to lower levels. I know what might be really going on here. Now, I know everything I've said up to now, my theories about John Bolton sound crazy to you, but hear me out. This will make, even if you reject everything else I've said, this will make perfect sense to you. Bolton wants to have fewer meetings because very often at these meetings there will be served pastry and other food items that might cause crumbs. And when you have a giant mustache, whether or not the mustache is in and of itself a separate breathing organism, or even if you reject what I think is a very sound and sane theory, even if the mustache, because I think Freud did say sometimes a mustache is just a mustache, even if the mustache is just a mustache, can you imagine getting crumbs in that thing? Any kind of food particles in that mustache? I mean, look, I have a little bit of facial hair. You know, if I have food on my face, I wipe it off with a napkin. It's easy. I keep this very well groomed and trimmed. Not so much the rest of me. I am a Yeti, so I am extraordinarily hairy. But as far as facial hair, I like to keep it closely trimmed. But that guy, I mean, food particles falling into that mustache, I can only imagine. I mean, he must have to... He probably brushes it, right? And if my theory that it is a living organism in and of itself is accurate, I'm sure the mustache probably starts purring or whatever, probably really likes to be brushed. Wouldn't you? I mean, if you were a giant mustache, wouldn't you want to be brushed regularly? So I would imagine he would have to brush out after every meeting if he, because he might be, I mean, obviously the easy answer would be, we'll have the meeting, but just don't have any of the delicious pastry on the table. But what if he can't help himself? What if he's a compulsive eater? What if he sees a blueberry muffin and says, I gotta have some of that muffin. I'm going to continue to work on my John Bolton impression. I think I actually could nail it after a while. I don't do impressions well. I think I can get this one. So he's like, I just can't help myself. Those muffins look so good. And then there he is eating the muffin and the crumbs are falling into the mustache. And then after the meeting, he's got to go back to his office and spend the next 90 minutes trying to comb everything out of the stash, and it's getting all over the floor, and then somebody's got to come and vacuum that up, and oh my goodness. So that could be what's really going on here. Again, it's a theory. I can't prove any of this. If I could believe, you know what? Someday maybe I will be able to prove it. Let's see. One White House official said, quote, he doesn't want to meeting an issue to death. He wants to make the bureaucratic process more efficient so that decisions can be made at the principal's level, unquote. Henry Noel joins us in the Facebook live chat. Hello, Henry. It says, but across the U.S. national security establishment, there's a growing sense that John Bolton's mustache is in fact evil. No, I misread that. I'm sorry. Okay, right. Sometimes I worry that I'm becoming dyslexic. Adult onset dyslexia, and I misread things. It says, but across the U.S. national security establishment, there's a growing sense of a breakdown in the policy process since Bolton took over the National Security Council on April 9th. Said Ivo Dailder, a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, who is now president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, quote, the rest of the government doesn't really know what the policy is. There's no record. There's no decision form. There's nothing out there to fall back on. Countries that we deal with don't really know what our policy is because people in the government don't know, unquote. Ask the mustache. It knows everything. I have an unknown, someone with an unknown name is calling my cell phone right now, and I'm concerned. It might be, what would happen if John Bolton's mustache started calling me and threatening me, and I had to contact law enforcement? What would I tell them? Would I say I need a restraining order against John Bolton, or would I say, hey, I need to? What can I legally do about the mustache? I don't know. I'm not even sure where I would go with that. That That would get very complicated very quickly. A person familiar with the situation, noting Bolton's reputation as a fierce bureaucratic knife fighter, added, quote, "There is a sense that Bolton isn't necessarily representing the full views of state and the Pentagon regarding some issues to the president," unquote. Bolton or his mustache do or does have that reputation, don't they? Or he or it. Aha! Sorry. This week, Bolton has scheduled a formal national security meeting, so called because the president sits on the gathering along with the agency and department chiefs to talk about election security. Two White House officials said the meeting will likely tackle the subject of Russia, which U.S. intelligence officials say interfered in the 2016 campaign to help Trump win. Oh, wait a second. To be fair, could have been Russia, could have been anybody. There's a lot of people out there. Could have been a 400-pound guy sitting on the end of his bed. The meeting will likely tackle... Okay, I read that already. Bolton also has scheduled 2 Principals Committee meetings to discuss Iran and North Korea this week. There's more to this, but I don't want to read the whole... If you want to read the whole story, it does get into more detail. Lots of... You know what? It is the reason I don't want to read the rest of that article, it is up on Politico if you want to read it, but here's the thing. The article goes on to speculate quite a bit about Bolton and his motives for why he may do certain things and whatnot. And that's fine, but personally, if there's one thing I never do, my friends, and if you're a regular listener of this show, you know that if there's one thing that I never, ever do on this program is speculate about things wildly and irresponsibly. I just won't. I will not ever do that. I stick to the facts. I don't go injecting my own, I'm not like some guy who just injects his own crazy theories and wild suppositions into things. I would never do that. Well, let's take a break. It's getting close to the top of the hour. I could use a drink of water because not only have I been talking for a long time, but it's about 1 million degrees in here. And I'm desperately thirsty. I'm exaggerating a little bit. It's only really about 500,000. Well, somewhere in between. It's about 750,000 degrees in here. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to play you something. I am going to have to mute the Facebook Live audio while I play this because if I stream copyrighted material on Facebook, I'll end up in Facebook jail. They'll delete the video. They'll send John Bolton's mustache after me. It'll just be a terrible calamity. So I'm going to play a song, maybe 2. So everybody watching on Facebook Live, of course, if you're in Manchester, you can listen on 95.3 FM. But you can also stream the show at WMNHradio.org. And you can hear everything. There's no muting there. WMNHradio.org. You can hear everything. But if you are in the Facebook Live, I will say goodbye to you for a few minutes at least. There we go. And I'm going to play this track. This is another one of those Rocky Mountain Mike songs. It's called The Matter of Trump. This is a lot of fun. And I'll be right back. More Matt Connarton Unleashed in the afternoon. We are live on WMNH 95.3 FM. Don't go anywhere. Because if you go anywhere, I will send John Bolton's mustache after you, and it will find you. I promise. Some say Trump is just a lying old fart. His fans remain of what began with a dumb racist start. And they may not want it to end, but it will. It's just a question of when. I was Rachel Maddow, so I have learned. The more Trump says you are fired, the more he'll get burned. I am
membership of a woman who complained about a man in the woman's locker room. Now, the biological man reportedly identified as a woman. Now, this was not the first such incident with Planet Fitness. A similar situation occurred in Michigan. But Planet Fitness has defended its policy that pointedly puts women at, potentially puts women at risk, saying they are, quote, a judgment-free zone. So when a woman complained about the fact that there was a male, biological male, in her locker room, she had her membership terminated. Now, she's taking action against them through the Liberty Council. But what was interesting is that Planet Fitness is not, well, I wouldn't say totally judgment-free. In Plaistow, New Hampshire, a man who stripped naked before working out at a New Hampshire gym, a Planet Fitness gym, told police officers that he thought he was in a judgment-free zone before being arrested. 34-year-old Eric Stagno of Haverhill, Massachusetts, was charged with indecent exposure, lewdness, and disorderly conduct on Sunday for taking off his clothes and exercising at the Planet Fitness location. Police say he walked back and forth and started doing poses on a yoga mat. He allegedly referenced Planet Fitness's slogan that it is a judgment-free zone. Stagno is free on bail and scheduled to be arraigned on September the 21st. He could not be reached for comment, according to this news article. So apparently Planet Fitness is not completely judgment-free, only judgment-free when it comes to political correctness. I'm telling you, at some point, all of that breaks down. It just does. Unless you have, as we have historically seen, traditional values rooted in natural law and biblical truth. Okay, those have withstood the test of time. But this nonsense, where you can define your own reality, folks, it doesn't work.
Now, it's very, very simple, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, it's very simple. It's because of Planet Fitness being nice to trans people that the the whole naked yoga incident happened. Right. That makes sense. What a world. Hey, everybody. It's hour number 2 of Matt Connarton Unleashed in the Afternoon. We are live on WMNH 95.3, emanating from downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Yeah, I couldn't resist that story. They were talking about it the other day on the morning show with Peter White and the Moose, the naked yoga guy at Planet Fitness. And then, of course, on my favorite website, rightwingwatch.org, I find this clip of Tony Perkins from, what is he from? The American something, some hate group. They're all, they're always worked up about gay people and trans people and all the, anybody who's different from what they think an American should be. And then, I found this clip of him, it's the trans inclusion policy at Planet Fitness. Oh, and the judgment-free zone, apparently he doesn't understand what they mean. When they say judgment-free zone, they just mean it's a marketing thing. Anybody can go and work out there. And I'm not shilling for Planet Fitness, by the way. They're not a sponsor in any way. We don't get any money from them. I'm just, they were in the news because of this incident that happened right here in New Hampshire. But when they say judgment-free zone, it just means, it's not a gym full of lunkheads who are grunting while lifting weights, and they look at you like you're a loser if you're not ingesting anabolic steroids on a regular basis. It's judgment-free. It's the kind of place anybody in theory can go and work out and feel comfortable. Now, in the case of the naked yoga guy, apparently he felt a little too comfortable, and that's a problem. But of course, these people like Tony Perkins and all these zealots, they have to make everything every little thing that goes wrong in the world is somehow related to our rejection of what they think is morality, because they think it's perfectly moral to reject and belittle and demean people who aren't quite like you. They think that that and that message works for them, I guess, because these they're very successful to an extent in promoting that message. But I like to I think the best way to fight back against that message, obviously, is with things like, compassion and empathy and logic and science and, all the things they hate, especially science. They tend to be very anti-science. But also, too, I like to just make fun of how ludicrous it is, this guy. It's because, they say it's a judgment-free zone, and that's why the guy doing yoga naked happened. And, come on. It's the same logic as, we've played a lot of clips on the show about, whenever there's some sort of natural disaster. It's, who's always the one to blame in their eyes for whenever there's like a big hurricane that ravages an area or an earthquake or something? Who do they always blame? Guys like Tony Perkins and his ilk. Who do they always blame? The gays. It's all because God's angry at gay people. That's the whole deal, which is hilarious because, like when something terrible happens to a red state like Texas, it's like, really, you'd think if God were mad about the gay people and liberal values and inclusion and tolerance, wouldn't he have sent that giant hurricane to destroy a state like Massachusetts, which is very liberal, or why or why not Hawaii, which I believe, at least on paper, tends to rank as the most liberal state in the country? Why hasn't he wiped out Hawaii yet? If God were so angry at liberals, couldn't he just like whip up a massive a big, what do you call that? A big I'm drawing a blank here. Oh my goodness. The giant wave, a tsunami. Couldn't he just stick his big God finger in the ocean and just whip up a giant tsunami to wipe out evil liberal Hawaii? I don't think God plays that way. I assume we still have New Testament God. Now, Old Testament God, yeah, he could be a little mean, but Edward Murphy in the in the Facebook live chat a moment ago while those songs were playing said, Matt, they put the heat up so you drink the water, which contains fluoride, which takes your essence. Oh, my good. Maybe that's how John Bolton's mustache got the way it was. It consumed too much water, and now it's evil. And then Jenny, who joins us in the Facebook live chat, says, Edward, no way. Matt had mojo done to protect his essence. I saw it. And then Ed said, LOL, Jenny, iMojo will always supersede loss of essence. Or not I. Oh, that's an exclamation point, not an I. Mojo will always supersede loss of essence. I hope so. I hope so. I would hate to lose my essence because of fluoride in the water. This is, I'll try not to spend too much time on this particular thing. This is a story that's a bit off the beaten path. I'm going to read you something that's kind of a pet issue of mine. This doesn't usually show up on anyone's top 5 issues. But it is something that's going on in the country. It's been happening for a very long time. It continues to happen. Some states have passed laws about this to try to tamp this down a little bit, but it's still going on, and it's an incredible abuse of our rights by the government, and it needs to be addressed. Civil asset forfeiture. If you're a longtime listener of the show, you know how passionately I oppose civil asset forfeiture, which is, of course, where the government gets to show up and seize all your assets, take all your stuff, seize your property, your cars, your homes, your bank accounts, whatever, on the mere suspicion that you may have done something wrong. You don't even, there's no due process, right? You don't have to be convicted of anything. You don't even have to be charged yet. Just once they suspect you've done something, typically this is used, of course, and if you're a longtime listener, you also know I vehemently oppose the drug war. I say end the drug war. Civil asset forfeiture is one of the tools the government uses to fight the drug war. which is one of the reasons why the drug war continues to rage on, even though we're making some progress. The drug war rages on because, well, it allows the government to take your stuff. And government, I don't know if you've noticed, they like to take your stuff. Typically, they do it through taxes, but if they can take it through other means, they're more than happy to. And then, and this relates to the story that I'm going to share with you in a moment. And then, let's suppose it turns out you didn't do anything wrong. You just get your stuff back, right? No. Not without a fight. Yeah, government's great at taking your stuff. They're not so good at giving it back. They don't really just, it's not like if you go to trial and you're found not guilty, or it's not like if the case is dismissed, maybe there's a lack of evidence or whatnot, or a judge throws it out, whatever happens. It's not like the government just says, "Oh, sorry, our bad. Here's your stuff back." No, you still got to fight for it. You still have to sue the government to get your stuff back, which they took from you illegally to begin with. And what are you going to sue them with? They seized your bank accounts. How are you going to hire a lawyer? It's madness. It is. It's such an abuse. I don't know why in this country we tolerate it to the extent that we do. A lot of people over the last number of years have been really waking up to this, right? But like I said, it's never on anyone's top 5 list of issues. Well, this is from Reason.com, and this article highlights why I just feel like this is so abusive and it needs to stop. Oh, Jeff Sessions, by the way, loves civil asset forfeiture. Not surprising. He also loves the drug war. He doesn't think that you should even have access to cannabis for medical reasons. He thinks you should just take some aspirin. Yes, he is on record as having said that. But he in particular loves civil asset forfeiture. He thinks it's just great. Okay, so this is from the Hit and Run blog on Reason.com. The author of this, C.J. Ciaramella, hopefully I said that remotely correctly. Michigan man files suit after waiting 3 years for a hearing to get his seized car back. The government's definition of prompt is a little different from everyone else's, especially when it comes to asset forfeiture. All right, so here's the story. Under Michigan law, Stephen Nichols was supposed to get a prompt court hearing to challenge the forfeiture of his car, which police in the town of Lincoln Park seized in 2015 because he was driving it without a valid insurance. It's been 3 years since then, and Nichols still hasn't had his day in court. Last month, Nichols and 2 other plaintiffs filed a federal class action lawsuit, first reported by the Detroit News, alleging that Wayne County police and prosecutors seized residents' property and forced them to wait months, sometimes years, for a hearing. The suit argues the delays violate the 14th Amendment right to due process. Yeah, it's unconstitutional. You have a right to due process, by the way, means you have a right to a fair and speedy trial. Yeah, the wheels of government tend to grind a bit slowly, but it's unconstitutional. In addition, Wayne County prosecutors offer to settle cases out of court for $900, leaving owners, I'm getting angrier as I read this, leaving owners to choose between getting their vehicle back quickly, even if they believe they were innocent, or shelling out even more money for a lawyer and waiting months to get their means of transportation back. So in other words, we're holding your property illegally, unconstitutionally, but if you pay us off, you can have it back. It's moments like this where I go, damn, you know what? Maybe the anarchists are right after all. Because while I personally believe that government is to some extent necessary and to some extent is good and positive and helpful, in terms of infrastructure and things like that, and we do need a criminal justice system, I believe. We do need that. But they really abuse the hell out of people, too. I mean, government can also be evil and abusive and a monster. I mean, again, the obscenity of this. This guy's been waiting 3 years to get his vehicle back. 3 years. Oh, but how nice of them. They'll go ahead and give it back to him. He just has to pay them $900. Let's see. Sean Goodwin, attorney for the plaintiffs, says, quote, Nichols still hasn't had any hearing. The law says prosecutors have to bring a case promptly, but it's just been in limbo for 3 years, unquote. The two other named plaintiffs in the lawsuit, Adam and Ryan Campbell, are a father and son, respectively. According to the suit, the younger, Chappell, not Campbell. Like I said, I think I'm developing adult onset dyslexia. According to the suit, the younger Chappell was borrowing his dad's car one day in July 2016 when Wayne County Sheriff's deputies saw him pull into a medical marijuana dispensary in Detroit. The cops pulled him over as he left and seized the car. No marijuana was recovered from the car, and no criminal charges were filed in the case, according to the lawsuit. Godwin says, quote, basically they alleged in the police report that he responded to a question and said he bought $15 worth of marijuana, but there's no mention of recovery of any marijuana in the police report. Of course, my client says that didn't happen, unquote. My God. Scumbags. These police, they're scumbags. Chappell's car was one of hundreds impounded by the Wayne County Sheriff's Office for visiting a medical marijuana dispensary. There's layers upon layers of absolute evil in the way the government is treating these people. Chances are, if you're going to a medical marijuana dispensary, you have something wrong with you. And you're being, not only are you being treated like a criminal, because I understand there's, plenty of people still in this country who think the drug war is a great thing, and if you one day you're using cannabis and the next day you're shooting heroin and breaking into people's homes and murdering people and whatever else they think happens if you use cannabis. I understand. There's still a lot of really uninformed, ignorant people running around, okay? But my God, it's bad enough. It's bad enough the way they're abusing people with this seizing their vehicles, but medical marijuana patients, people who are sick, right? Sick. People who are sick just trying to get their medicine, having their vehicles impounded by the government. I mean, this is absolutely evil. I mean, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic in saying that. This is evil. This is sociopathy. This is the government just blatantly abusing its citizens. Look, I'm not an anarchist. I barely even qualify as a libertarian at this point because, like I said, I do think government's necessary. I do think government does some good things. I do think we need government, okay? But, oh my God, the anarchists have a point. They have a point. Because government can be, aside from all the wars that we fight and all of that, which is terrible, because it's not about defending the country. That's all a farce. It's about the military-industrial complex, and people profit from war. War is a business. War is a racket. But we also have the government. And by the way, the drug war is in really. I wish I could remember who said this because they put it really eloquently. The reason we call it a war on drugs is because it's the government fighting a war against its own people, against its own citizenry. That's what the real war is. The war on drugs is really a war on all of us, whether you use drugs or not, or whether you use someone's idea of a drug, what falls under someone's definition of a quote-unquote drug or not. It doesn't matter. It is the government's war on the American people. You know, some people think it's, the government's always trying to take your guns away. The government's always looking for a way to repeal the Second Amendment and take your guns. To me, that tends to sound a little bit paranoid, but I'm glad there's people out there fighting to protect our Second Amendment rights. I don't always agree with the way they do it or some of the propaganda, but I'm glad that they're trying to protect us, right? But I don't think that's, 8 years of Obama and the conspiracy theorists' wild ideas that, any day now he was going to send in the black helicopters from the UN to collect everyone's guns. I mean, it would be physically impossible, right? No, I think the real war that the government wages on the American people is the war on drugs. It is a war against all of us. Because this guy, they didn't even recover any cannabis from him. All he did was go to a dispensary. Apparently they recovered nothing, but they seized his car anyway. And he didn't get it back. And who knows if he's ever going to. That is a war against the American people. That is what the real war is. And again, I'm not an anarchist. I'm not saying get rid of government. But my God, why do we tolerate this? Why do we tolerate this? We don't have to. We can start really asking our elected lawgivers and overlords some hard questions about why do you allow this to go on? Maybe we need to start electing some people. Again, I know it's not on anyone's top 5 list of issues, but maybe it should be. Maybe it should be. Again, I'm not an anarchist. I'm not saying get rid of government, but this is intolerable. There's no reason for it. I mean, there are reasons for it. There's people profiting from it, right? I mean, we've all heard and read the stories, right, of where drugs actually are seized, unlike in this case, where drugs actually are seized and then some of it disappears. That goes on. We've all heard and read those stories, right? Oh, the police seized 10 pounds of cocaine in a drug bust, and or the DEA or whatever, and then somehow, but there's now we're hearing reports that half of it's missing, and no one knows where it. I mean, come on. It's all such a giant scam. The drug war is so bad. It's a war against us, and people need to wake up to it. This is awful, but it's the harassment of medical cannabis patients that just makes it that much worse. Why would you do that to people? It says here, the Wayne County Sheriff's Office reported in 2016 that it surveilled 32 medical marijuana dispensaries, performed 634 investigatory stops of cars leaving dispensaries, and impounded 467 vehicles as part of Operation Push Off, a local law enforcement initiative targeting drugs, prostitution, and drag racing funded by licensing fees collected from the state's medical marijuana program. This story gets worse by the paragraph. Money collected from the state's medical marijuana program was then used to lock up legal medical marijuana users. Do you understand how bad this really is? Oh my God. And in the United States of America, land of the free, we tolerate this kind of stuff. Something like this shouldn't be a story that I find on a page on Reason.com, which is a great site, and kudos to Reason for this, but this should be reported by every major news outlet in the country that things like this go on. And yet it doesn't happen. This is horrendous. And everyone should know about it. And every one of these, everybody involved in this, all of the police involved in this, all the prosecutors involved in this, in this racket. I sincerely hope that there is a special corner of hell for all of these people. For everyone who participated in a traffic stop of these people, pulling these people over, the surveillance, the prosecution of them, or the lack of prosecution but just taking their vehicles to an impound yard. All of them. I mean, I don't particularly believe in hell, but this kind of thing makes me want to, and I want to believe that there is a special circle in hell that all of these truly just absolute evil sociopaths end up in for eternity. You know, I mean, I'm in virulent opposition of the death penalty. If you're a longtime listener, you know, but I almost think we should make an exception for the law enforcement involved in this particular scam. It's a scam against the people. They took money collected from, because, you know, I'm sure it's like this in probably every state where they have, where they've legalized medical cannabis. You participate in a program, you get a card or whatever, you got to pay some sort of fee for that, right? So you have to, you know, to be able to have access to the medicine that you need for whatever your condition is, you have to not only ask the government for permission to have access to that medicine, but you have to pay them for the privilege of asking for permission to get access to that medicine. And then they take that money and use it to arrest you, to entrap you and arrest you. How is this not this should be a major story. Everybody should be talking about this. Everybody should be upset. Every single member of law enforcement involved in this should be fired. Every single victim of this should have whatever they were charged with expunged from their record. You know, this is, and again, I know I keep saying this, but I just don't know why we tolerate this abuse. Let's see. There's more to this article if you want to read the whole thing. It's up on reason.com. And hopefully we can come back to this story in the future, and there'll be somewhat of a happy ending to it. And hopefully the people who are involved in this class action lawsuit win against the government. I don't want to spend any more time on this story because I'm genuinely furious. I mean, it's... And I know, hey, I'm sure there's somebody listening to this show right now, because there's plenty of people out there who are so just pro law and order, you know, that, you know, you're not supposed to question the police. You're not supposed to question anything law enforcement does. You know, it's like, no, you have a right as a taxpayer to ask questions and to speak up. There's when it comes to part of the thing, though, this is just a side observation, and then we will move on because I'm going to have an aneurysm if I think about this much more. You know what? Actually, we're just going to move on. I'm not even going to, we'll come back to this another day. We need to, we need to move on from this. Wow. We haven't really had a chance to get into the Michael Cohen stuff. You know, the tape that was released of he and Trump talking about payment for Stormy Daniels and all that. But one of the things that's fascinating about it to me, and I don't think, I mean, there's no great smoking gun in the, I'm not even going to bother to play the audio. You've probably, I mean, if you've paid attention to this at all, you've already heard the audio probably multiple times ad nauseum on cable news, but you know, there's nothing terribly shocking there, as much as some people are trying to make it a bigger deal than it is. Now, there may be now they're saying, reports are that over 100 other recordings were seized by the FBI, and if those start to come out, it could get very, very interesting. But this was, I mean, it was kind of fun just to hear Trump, and Michael Cohen did most of the talking in the audio. But what's fascinating to me about this is you've got an attorney recording his own client without his client's knowledge. And what does that what does that tell you about the I mean, I guess the only thing we can really glean from that is Cohen, because to be clear, it was a secret recording. This wasn't like well, I don't know who, like in the case of Nixon, I think others knew, right, that he had that secret. Like when he was recording all those conversations, like with Ehrlichman and everybody else. I mean, I think, did they know they were being recorded? Maybe in some instances they did, and in some they didn't. But Nixon, obviously, I mean, he was operating the, or I don't think he was operating the system, because I think it turned on automatically whenever he picked up the phone or whenever he entered the Oval Office or somehow. But only Cohen knew, this was a one-party consent. Because in some states you have two-party consent where both parties have to consent to being recorded. Some states are one-party consent where you don't necessarily need the consent of the other person involved in the conversation to record it. But obviously, Trump had no idea. So why would Cohen do this? And obviously, Cohen knew that someday he might need this material. And Michael Cohen, who is on record as having said at various times, he's pledged his loyalty, his undying fealty to the president. At one point, I think he actually said he would take a bullet for Trump, But the whole time, he's so loyal to him, and yet he was smart enough, I guess we can say it that way, to have a little insurance policy for himself, I guess, and now he's sort of using it. And the implications of that are fascinating. Does it mean that he's flipped, or he's about to flip, or is there anything to flip on? Does he actually have anything incriminating against Trump, or does he have things incriminating against other people? What is actually there? But just the fact that you've got this lawyer secretly recording his own client is fascinating to me. And what does it say about Cohen, and what does it say about his relationship with Trump? Now, I have some audio. Actually, from a couple of legal experts. I don't think I'm going to play the Jonathan Turley clip because it's a bit long. It's almost 5 minutes long, so I'm not going to play that. I'll just go over some of what he said. But this is from Mediaite.com. Jonathan Turley, who's typically a contributor on MSNBC, he says it's deeply troubling that Cohen would record Trump. So on Morning Joe, NBC legal analyst and George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley discussed the legal implications of last night's release of the audio from a secret recording of Donald Trump made by his ex-attorney Michael Cohen. He says that Cohen is obviously dangerous to the president. Turley said, quote, "He really does follow that Dorothy Parker adage that you scratch a lover, find a foe. And this is a very dangerous foe, obviously, for the president," unquote. But he also had criticism for Cohen. He said, quote, "The fact that he would secretly record his client is deeply troubling for an attorney. I mean, most attorneys are quite shocked. It doesn't make it illegal. The president is wrong about that when he says it might be illegal in New York. It probably is not," unquote. Again, if New York is a one-party state, then it's not illegal. Not illegal, though, he notes that, quote, "There's been a debate about whether it's ethical. That issue is still out there," unquote. In Turley's latest column, published prior to the release of the audio, he has few kind words for Cohen's ethics or his skill as an attorney. He wrote for The Hill, quote, "Cohen was not selected for his legal skills. He was willing to do things most lawyers would not do," unquote. He also wrote that, quote, "Cohen's loyalties are as dubious as his legal skills. Cohen's solution to every problem is self-immolation. It's one of the worst possible things you could do at that moment," unquote. And that was Turley speaking about Cohen's plan to buy the rights to the story from the National Enquirer, which they ended up not going through with. And I think that's actually what they were talking about in the recording, if I'm not mistaken. It was about that. But it wasn't about the payment to Stormy Daniels and all that. It was about the plan to buy the rights to the story from the Enquirer, which apparently goes on all the time. That's not an unusual practice, from what I've learned. It says, bad news for everyone involved would be Turley's takeaway here. He says, quote, I don't think this is as extraordinary as Giuliani makes out, unquote. But it's not establishing a crime either. So that was Jonathan Turley's reaction. And then Andrew Napolitano, Judge Napolitano on Fox, of course, he kind of had his own take on it. This is also from Mediaite. He's saying that, so just to give this a little bit of context, so Giuliani said that this is a violation of attorney-client privilege if Cohen is leaking this, is putting this audio out there. By the way, do we even know exactly where the audio came from at this moment, at this point? I don't think we do. Napolitano says that Trump has no attorney-client protection on tapes because he was engaging in civil fraud. So Napolitano, again, not towing the party line when he goes on Fox. This is him talking with Bill Hemmer, and I am going to play this clip because I want to make sure we get the. This is interesting, and I haven't heard anyone else say this exactly other than Napolitano, but this is interesting and very damning for Trump if what Napolitano is saying here, if his theory of the case, so to speak, is true. So let's the audio's loading.
I believe a good leader.
And there's an ad. I'm sorry about that. I thought I had that already queued up and ready to go, but the ad's almost over and we can skip it. Here we go. All right, here's Napolitano.
Shalano's with me in studio, and Judge, nice to see you.
Morning, Bill.
Giuliani's case, no payments ever made.
Right.
Giuliani's case, no indication of any crime. Is there?
There doesn't appear to be the indication of any crime, but I think that's the wrong analysis. There is an indication of a fraud, and the significance of that is if the client and the lawyer discuss the commission of a crime or discuss the commission of a fraud, there is no attorney-client privilege in that conversation, meaning the tape can be used by anybody who can get their hands on it for any purposes.
Which would include Bob Mueller?
McDougal if she's suing the president, which would include Bob Mueller if he's investigating the president. Now, what's the fraud? The conversation is about paying National Enquirer to pay McDougal $150,000 to buy her story and to lead her to believe that the National Enquirer is going to publish her story. But the real aim here is to bury the story by duping her into selling it to them and then not publishing it. That failure to be truthful to her and the involvement of Donald Trump and Michael Cohen in that decision is the fraud.
You say that's not a criminal fraud.
It's a civil
That's a civil fraud, and what is the difference?
Criminal fraud is where you dupe somebody out of cash to enrich yourself. Civil fraud is when you dupe somebody out of cash for some other purpose. The other purpose here was to keep the story from being put in the press by lying to her and telling her, we'll pay you $150,000. You don't talk to anybody else and we'll publish your story when they never intended to publish it.
Based on that analysis, criminal is more severe than civil.
Absolutely.
Is it not?
Yes, of course it is. But both civil fraud, criminal fraud are enough to burst the attorney-client privilege. That's where the Giuliani argument fails and the Lanny Davis argument prevails.
Two more questions. Rights were never bought to the story on behalf of the Trump team, correct? And the story was never printed.
Right.
Does that give a fair explanation for what was happening here?
As I understand it, and I could be wrong, the money went from some source, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump, to the newspaper, to Ms. McDougal. She believed she was selling her story to be published. Because they misled her, there was never an intention to publish it. That transaction was fraudulent.
Were laws broken here? campaign finance laws? Was anything here done that was illegal?
That is an analysis for Mueller to make. If the purpose of this was to help the campaign finance laws were broken. But that, too, is not a crime. It's a violation of a statute, but it's not a criminal statute.
Does that mean Giuliani's right in his defense so far?
Giuliani is correct in that there is no criminal violation. He is incorrect by not addressing the fact that this is a fraud, because he knows that crimes and fraud both vitiate the attorney-client privilege.
There are 12 audio tapes, I do believe, that apparently Cohen gave to the feds.
God only knows what else is in there. Now, Cohen didn't give anything to the feds.
No, they took
the
him
feds seized
his office.
it. Right. And I'll make this even more complex. Rudy waived the attorney-client privilege with respect to this tape because he believes that this tape helps the president. It helps the president in that there's no crime. It hurts the president in that there's an obvious fraud.
Do you think the president has something to worry about here?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Based on?
If there's no attorney-client privilege, then all his communications about these subject matters with Michael Cohen go right to Bob Mueller, and to do with whatever he's going to do with it.
Thank you, Judge. We'll see where it goes next.
And I think we can punctuate all of that with a big uh-oh. But Napolitano's analysis of that more detailed than and interesting, I think, than any of the other analysis that I've seen on cable news. And we have been joined here in the studio by the Dions. It's Ben Dion and his father, Daryl Dion. How are you both doing? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't bring your mic up. I'm sorry. There we go. Go ahead and say that again.
Good. How are you?
Good.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Yes, I've been away. I was in. I don't know if you heard about my big trip.
No.
Went to. Well, let me put it this way. I think I can summarize the last couple of weeks this way. You have not lived until you have experienced nude sunbathing with Dennis Rodman and Kim Jong-un.
Cut it out.
No, it's true. I mean, whether you believe my story or not, that is a factual statement. You have not lived.
That's probably true.
Yes, I mean, I think Confucius had said that. So it was quite a trip. I don't mean to brag, and I don't like to name drop, but my close personal friend, Dennis Rodman, did take Jenny and I to North Korea. And we met with Kim Jong-un. We engaged in some free throw. That was exciting. Kim does have some game, despite being very, very small.
Was he 5'2"?
He's even it turns out. So he looks that short on television. It turns out he wears lifts. He is 4'10".
Of course he does.
Dennis Rodman also wears lifts. A very famous basketball player, and he looks like a really big guy. Turns out he's 5'6".
So those are some serious lifts.
Oh yeah. He can afford them. He's rich, or he was anyway. I think he blew most of his money.
I think
probably.
So.
I think he blew it on blow. But I was actually the tallest one there. But I let Kim win.
You have to.
Our free throw contest. Yes, he did say to me something about if I won, he would kill me. Now he was laughing when he said it.
Of course he was.
He was probably just kind of just joshing me, good naturedly or whatnot. But I don't know. I don't know the culture. I don't know if people joke about that kind of thing there.
Probably not.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't, but.
Yeah. I was a stranger in a strange land. I just kind of went along with whatever. You know what I mean? I was just happy to be there. Happy to feel like I was doing my part for diplomacy. I mean, not to get a big head about it, but I do think I kind of helped avoid, further hostilities. And so, while our president was hanging out with his BFF, Vlad the Impaler, I was doing my part in another corner of the world. Well, I shouldn't really say another corner of the world because the two. There's a border there. They're kind of both right there. But you know what I mean.
I gotcha.
And the world doesn't really have corners anyway. It's an expression. It's just this big round thing. Unless, of course, you believe the flat earthers. They actually do think the world has corners, which is very strange. But
that's a whole other show.
Yes, that certainly is. What do you gentlemen have coming up tonight on the Weekly Dion?
So we have a different thing going on. Normally we have an in studio guest.
Yes.
Our guest sadly couldn't make it because he has a work event, but it's not until later on. But it's in Boston. So he's actually going to call in via Skype.
Yeah. Yes. And, Peter asked me to leave the computer open.
Yeah,
for you.
we're going to do the same thing we normally do. he's going to call in on Skype. So
very good.
We have it all set. I just talked to him 20 minutes ago, so we're all ready to go.
And who is he? What does he do?
Gray Chenoweth, running for executive council.
Gray Chenoweth, yes.
Part of Dine, now part of Army. Dean Kamen's new thing in the mill yard.
Very good.
But yeah, we talked mostly about the election, about his candidacy for executive council in District 4, which is Chris Pappas' seat.
Yes.
Chris Pappas is running for Congress, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a unique race. One of 2 Democrats running. There's a few Republicans running, I believe, including our former Mayor Ted Gattis. He's running for executive council, Republican side.
Yeah.
So yeah, it should be an interesting conversation. I met Gray a couple weeks ago at his campaign kickoff at the Bookery. I went down, wanted to meet him firsthand, and yeah, it should be a good show. Looking forward to it.
I think he called into my show once. I think John Hopwood arranged it. I think it was Gray Chenoweth.
Oh, Gray was on John's show, his TV show. Yeah,
right, yeah. And then I think it was maybe that same day he called in here, but he couldn't he couldn't get in here. No, that's excellent. And you, since the last time I saw you, are now right. I haven't seen you since the marriage, right?
Yeah, married, went on the honeymoon.
Yeah,
we took 3 weeks off from the show.
Yeah,
which I was getting complaints. They're like, "What's going on? Like, where are you?" I said, I couldn't do the show from the rehearsal dinner.
Yeah,
there wasn't good service in Punta Cana, and then the following week was the 4th of July weekend.
There wasn't good service where?
Punta Cana, Dominican Republic.
Okay.
That was the honeymoon. Yeah,
I was gonna say for a second there. I mean, it sounded like something you shouldn't say on the radio, but I guess, but if it's the name of a place, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I do have a, how do you say it? Punta Cana?
Punta Cana.
I do have a terrible feeling that if I went to urbandictionary.com and looked it up, I would find something horrifying.
Probably.
Yeah. So I'm not going to do that. But so where is that?
Dominican Republic.
The Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty nice. We're there for 6 days.
Wow. Actually, it's a pretty popular place. A friend of mine's secretary's been there several times.
Oh, okay.
So it's
I've never
people go there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
A little bit more reasonable priced, all inclusive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good. So we were off for 3 weeks, and then last week I was actually in Vermont.
Oh.
For I was doing a training for my teaching.
Oh, okay.
To teach AP macroeconomics.
Oh.
So I was away there. So that was a last minute thing. I wasn't sure if I was going. They approved it, so I went.
Yeah.
So after 3 weeks, I only had one show, and then I had last week off, and then we'll be on for the next 3 weeks, and then I'm going to DC actually.
Oh.
Summer's busy.
For what? Why are you going to DC?
I've never been.
Oh, you're just going to take the trip? Yeah.
Yeah, my wife wanted me to go. She really wanted to make it happen because she knew I wanted to go.
Yeah.
So we're taking a week trip to DC. She has some relatives there, so we'll stay with them for a little bit, and we have a hotel actually in the city.
Very
pretty
nice.
Reasonably priced too. So yeah, we're gonna check out the landmarks, and we've planned out a whole little thing to do.
Yeah,
so looking forward to it.
Very good.
It's pretty exciting. I was there in '65, and I was just in high school, but it was a terrific experience.
Yeah,
it really was. I wanted to sit in Abe's lap, but never got there.
Yeah, I don't think they let you climb up there, do they?
It would be a real problem if you did.
Yes, yes,
yeah,
absolutely. I heard they put like butter on his lap so that if you try to climb up there, you just slide right off. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Aren't you going on a trip, or did you already go?
That's not till next year. He's going to Europe next year. Yeah.
Oh.
But the good news is I'm actually able to plan for it next month.
Oh.
I haven't been able to set it yet because they don't take reservations until August or September.
Oh, okay.
So it's getting closer. I'm getting pretty excited.
Yeah. I believe it or not, I've only been to DC once, and it wasn't even. I didn't really get to see much of the city. I was in a band that was on tour. This would have been 2004. Yeah, 2004, and we played a club there. I think it was called the 930 Club in DC. Cool. I just remember afterward we had as we're loading out, we had like crackheads coming up to us, and
it's always nice.
That was my experience in our nation's capital. But the show was fun. There were a lot of people.
It's funny too. When I was there in '65, I was also there with a band.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, the Bishop Bradley Band.
Okay.
High school band.
Oh.
We went there for the Cherry Blossom Festival.
Oh. Well, that's cool.
It was great.
Did you have crackheads coming up to you after?
No,
okay.
No, but we did partake
yours was probably during the day.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, mine was at night.
Crackheads in 1965. I don't think they existed then.
Maybe not. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Was that invented by then? or come up with by then?
Oh no.
No. I don't know.
But it was a lot of fun. I had an interesting experience for the weekend. I had been pretty sheltered, fairly sheltered.
Yeah.
So I had my first cigarette, my first drink, and my first. I met a woman there as well.
Sounds like DC corrupted you.
They were. My folks thought that forever.
Yeah.
When I came back, I wasn't the same guy.
Well, hey, look at it this way. DC corrupts a lot of people.
I sure do.
Yes, yes. Well, we got to start to wrap up, but of course, it's great to see you guys, and stick around because the weekly Die-On is coming up next at 6 p.m. right here on WMNH 95.3 FM. I'm going to get out of here. Of course, if you missed any part of today's show, it is up and available at WMNHradio.org. And as are all the shows here at WMNH, and I'll be back tomorrow. Of course, Matt Connarton, Unleashed in the Afternoon, live weekdays 4 to 6 right here on WMNH 95.3 FM. So the Die-Ons are next, and I will talk at y'all a little bit later. Bye, everybody.